Hi, I'm Rashonda Kay. This is Reading with Rashonda. We are reading The Escape, a play by William Wells Brown. We've read Act 1, Scenes 1 and 2. We are now on Act 1, Scene 3. But before we start Act 1, Scene 3, I mentioned that I believe The Escape can be understood as another version of his novel Clotel. So William Wells Brown did The Escape in 1858. Clotel was first published in 1853. There's also an 1864 version and an 1868 version. And I find a lot of, there's also another version, it's called Meralda, that was published serially that I've never read. So I can't really speak to a lot of things about it. Anyway, there's a continuity of themes and ideas, but also characters between all of these things. And there are character name shifts, parts of stories get put together and pulled apart. And one of the reasons I think this is on the Clotel continuum is what we did last time with the tooth pulling scene. That's in the 1853 version of Clotel. I don't believe it is in the other versions. I have a list. I have a list of things that happen in the different versions and how I think they're related, because I think about this stuff all the time. But anyway, oh, all right, I had that piece of hair doing what it wants to do. It was one of the gray ones. You know how those gray hairs are. They do whatever they feel like doing. So here we are in The Escape by William Wells Brown, Act 1, Scene 3. A room in the quarters. Enter Glenn. Glenn. How slowly the time passes away. I've been waiting here 2 hours and Melinda has not yet come. What keeps her, I cannot tell. I waited long and late for her last night, and when she approached, I sprang to my feet, caught her in my arms, pressed her to my heart, and kissed away the tears from her moistened cheeks. She placed her trembling hand in mine and said, Glenn, I am yours. I will never be the wife of another. I clasped her to my bosom and called God to witness that I would ever regard her as my wife. Old Uncle Joseph joined us in holy wedlock by moonlight. That was the only marriage ceremony. I look upon the vow as ever binding on me, for I am sure that a just God will sanction our union in heaven. Still, this man who claims Melinda as his property is unwilling for me to marry the woman of my choice because he wants her for himself. But he shall not have her. What he will say when he finds that we are married, I cannot tell. But I am determined to protect my wife or die. Ah, here comes Melinda. Enter Melinda. I am glad to see you, Melinda. I've been waiting long and feared you would not come. Ah, in tears again? Melinda. Glenn, you are always thinking I am in tears. But what did Master say today? Glenn. He again forbade our union. Melinda. Indeed. Can he be so cruel? Glenn. Yes, he can be just so cruel. Melinda. Alas, alas, how unfeeling and heartless. But did you appeal to his generosity? Glenn. Yes, I did. I used all the persuasive powers that I was master of, but to no purpose. He was inflexible. He even offered me a new suit of clothes if I would give you up. And when I told him that I could not, he said he would flog me to death if I ever spoke to you again. Melinda, and what did you say to him? Glenn, I answered that while I loved life better than death, even life itself could not tempt me to consent to a separation that would make life an unchanging curse. Oh, I would kill him myself, Melinda, if I thought that, for the sake of life, I could consent to your degradation. No, Melinda, I can die, but shall never live to see you the mistress of another man. But, my dear girl, I have a secret to tell you, and no one must know it but you. I will go out and see that no person is within hearing. I'll be back soon. Exit Glenn. Melinda. It is often said that the darkest hour of the night precedes the dawn. It is ever thus with the vicissitudes of human suffering. After the soul has reached the lowest depths of despair and can no deeper plunge amid its rolling fetid shades, then the reactionary forces of man's nature begin to operate. Resolution takes the place of despondency, energy succeeds instead of apathy, and an upward tendency is felt and exhibited. Men then hope against power and smile in defiance of despair. I shall never forget when I first saw Glenn. It is now more than a year since he came here with his master, Mr. Hamilton. It was a glorious moonlight night in autumn. The wide and fruitful face of nature was silent and buried in repose. The tall trees on the borders of Muddy Creek waved their leafy branches in the breeze, which was wafted from afar, refreshing over hill and vale, over the rippling water and the waving corn and wheat fields. The starry sky was studded over with a few light flitting clouds, while the moon, as if rejoicing to witness the meeting of two hearts that should be cemented by the purest love, sailed triumphantly along among the shifting vapors. Oh, how happy I have been in my acquaintance with Glenn! That he loves me, I do well believe it. That I love him, it is most true. Oh, how I would that those who think the slave incapable of the finer feelings could only see our hearts and learn our thoughts, thoughts that we dare not utter in the presence of our masters. But I fear that Glenn will be separated from me, for there is nothing too base and mean for master to do for the purpose of getting me entirely in his power. But thanks to heaven, he does not own Glenn, and therefore he cannot sell him. Yet he might purchase him from his brother in law so as to send him out of the way. But here comes my husband. Enter Glenn. Glenn, I've been as far as the overseer's house, and all is quiet. Now, Melinda, as you are my wife, I will confide to you a secret. I've long been thinking of my escape to Canada and taking you with me. It is true that I don't belong to your master, but he might buy me from Hamilton and then sell me out of the neighborhood. Melinda, but we could never succeed in an attempt to escape. Glenn, we will make the trial and show that we at least deserve success. There is a slave trader expected here next week, and Dr. Gaines would sell you at once if he knew that we were married. We must get ready and start. And if we can pass the Ohio River, we'll be safe on the road to Canada. Exit. Scene 4, dining room. Reverend Mr. Pinchen giving Mrs. Gaines an account of his experience as a minister. Hannah clearing away the breakfast table. Sampy standing behind Mrs. Gaines's chair. Mrs. Gaines. Now do give me more of your experience, Brother Pinchen. It always does my soul good to hear religious experience. It draws me nearer and nearer to the Lord's side. I do love to hear good news from God's people. Mr. Pinchen. Well, Sister Gaines, I've had great opportunities in my time to study the heart of man. I've attended a great many camp meetings, revival meetings, protracted meetings, and deathbed scenes, and I am satisfied, Sister Gaines, that the heart of man is full of sin and desperately wicked. Excuse me. This is a wicked world, Sister Gaines, a wicked world. Mrs. Gaines, were you ever in Arkansas, Brother Pinchen? I've been told that the people out there are very ungodly. Mr. Pinchen, oh, yes, Sister Gaines. I once spent a year at Little Rock and preached in all the towns around about there. I found some hard cases out there, I can tell you. I was once spending a week in a district where there were a great many horse thieves. And one night, somebody stole my pony. Well, I knowed it was no use to make a fuss, so I told Brother Tarbox to say nothing about it, and I'd get my horse by preaching God's everlasting gospel, for I had faith in the truth and knowed that my Savior would not let me lose my pony. So the next Sunday, I preached on horse stealing and told the brethren to come up with to come up in the evening with their hearts filled with the grace of God. So that night, the house was crammed brim full with anxious souls panting for the bread of life. Brother Bingham opened with prayer, and Brother Tarbox followed, and I saw right off with it we were going to have a blessed time. After I got him pretty well warmed up, I jumped up to one of the seats, stretched out my hands, and said, I know who stole my pony. I found out. And you are in here trying to make people believe that you've got religion, but you ain't got it. And if you don't take my horse back to Brother Tarbox's pasture this very night, I'll tell your name right out in meeting tomorrow night. Take my pony back, you vile and wretched sinner, and come up here and give your heart to God. So the next morning, I went out to Brother Tarbox's pasture, and sure enough, there was my bobtail pony. Yes, Sister Gaines, there he was, safe and sound. Ha ha! Mrs. G. Oh, how interesting, and how fortunate for you to get your pony. And what power there is in the gospel. God's children are very lucky. Oh, it is so sweet to sit here and listen to such good news from God's people. You, Hannah, what are you standing there listening for and neglecting your work? Never mind, my lady, I'll whip you well when I am done here. Go at your work this moment, you lazy hussy. Never mind, I'll whip you. Come, do go on, Brother Pinchin, with your godly conversation. It is so sweet. It draws me nearer and nearer to the Lord's table. Mr. P. Well, Sister Gaines, I've had some mighty queer dreams in my time, that I have. You see, one night I dreamed that I was dead and in heaven, and such a place I never saw before. As soon as I entered the gates of the celestial empire, I saw many old and familiar faces that I had seen before. The first person that I saw was good old Elder Pike, the preacher that first called my attention to religion. The next person I saw was Deacon Billings, my first wife's father, and then I saw a host of godly faces. Why, Sister Gaines, you knowed Elder Gooseby, didn't you? Mrs. G. Why, yes. Did you see him there? He married me to my first husband. Mr. P. Oh, yes, Sister Gaines. I saw the elder, and he looked for all the world as if he had just come out of a revival meeting. Mrs. G. Did you see my first husband there, Brother Pinchin? Mr. P. No, Sister Gaines, I didn't see Brother Pepper there. But I've no doubt but that Brother Pepper was there. Mrs. G. Well, I don't know. I have my doubts. He was not the happiest man in the world. He was always borrowing trouble about something or another. Still, I saw some happy moments with Mr. Pepper. I was happy when I made his acquaintance, happy during our courtship, happy a while after our marriage, and happy when he died. Hannah. Massa Pinchin, did you see my old man Ben up there in heaven? Mr. P. No, Hannah, I didn't go amongst the niggers. Mrs. G. No, of course Brother Pinchin didn't go among the blacks. What are you asking questions for? Never mind, my lady, I'll whip you well when I'm done here. I'll skin you from head to foot. Do go on with our heavenly conversation, Brother Pinchin. It does my very soul good. This is indeed a precious moment for me. I do love to hear of Christ and Him crucified. Mr. P. Well, Sister Gaines, I promised Sister Daniels that I'd come over and see her this morning and have a little season of prayer with her, and I suppose I must go. I'll tell you more of my religious experience when I return. Mrs. G. If you must go, then I'll have to let you. But before you do, I wish to get your advice upon a little matter that concerns Hannah. Last week, Hannah stole a goose, killed it, cooked it, and she and her man Sam had a fine time eating the goose, and her master and I would never have known a word about it if it had not been for Cato, a faithful servant who told his master. And then you see, Hannah had to be severely whipped before she'd confess she stole the goose. Next Sabbath is Sacrament Day, and I want to know if you think that Hannah is fit to go to the Lord's Supper after stealing the goose. Mr. P. Well, Sister Gaines, that depends on circumstances. If Hannah has confessed that she stole the goose and has been sufficiently whipped and has begged her master's pardon and begged your pardon and thinks she'll never do the like again, why, then I suppose she can go to the Lord's Supper. For while the lamp holds out to burn, the vilest sinner may return. But she must be sure that she has repented and won't steal any more. Mrs. G. Now, Hannah, do you hear that? For my own part, I don't think she's fit to go to the Lord's Supper, for she had no occasion to steal the goose. We give our niggers plenty of good, wholesome food. They have a full run to the meal tub, meat once a fortnight, and all the sour milk about the place. And I'm sure that's enough for anyone. I do think that our niggers are the most ungrateful creatures in the world, that I do. They aggravate the life out of me. Hannah. I know, Mrs. Dat I steal the goose, and Massa whipped me for it, and I confess it, and I is sorry for it. But, Mrs., I is going to the Lord's Supper next Sunday, 'cause I ain't gonna turn my back on my blessed Lord and Massa for no old tough goose. Dat I ain't. Mr. P. Well, Sister Gaines, I suppose you must go over and see Sister Daniels. She'll be waiting for me. Exit Mr. Pinchen. Mrs. G. Now, Hannah, Brother Pinchen is gone. Do you get the cowhide and follow me to the cellar, and I'll whip you for aggravating me as you have today. It seems as if I can never sit down to take a little comfort with the Lord without you crossing me. The devil always puts it into your head to disturb me just when I am trying to serve the Lord. I've no doubt that I'll miss going to heaven on your account, but I'll whip you well before I leave this world, that I will. Get the cowhide and follow me to the cellar. Exit Mrs. Gaines and Hannah. And that is the end of Act One. Um, Obviously, we've got the juxtaposition of Mrs. Gaines's conversation with Hannah, that's all mean and I'll whip you, and her conversation with the minister, that's like, ooh, I love Jesus. The minister using all sorts of things like, I guess if she has repented and got whipped and returned the goose and whatever he said, then I guess she could have the Lord's Supper. My. And I'm not fanning because I'm hot. I'm cold because I've got all this on. But like, woo, this stuff makes you want to take a fan and think about things. All right. So that's where we are right now in The Escape. We have finished Act One. I'm Rashonda Cade, and this is Reading with Rashonda. Until next time.